Hey there, I'm Jamie Starcevich with Spruce Road, and in this video, I'm going to walk through one simple strategy that I use in my own design process that really helps me focus on typography first when it comes to design. This is applicable whether you are designing for logo types or a complete brand identity, a layout design, a simple promo graphic, or website design. Really anything that uses words, I'm going to fall back on this same strategy for my own design process. And what it does is it helps me prevent myself from jumping in too deep into design without first considering the foundations. So possibly like you, when I was early in my career, or even now I do this sometimes, my inclination is to really dive in deep to a project. I can't help it as a designer, but to envision what the design is going to look like when it's fully executed. What I mean by that is as I'm designing for a brand, I can't help but think about color, imagery, illustrations, patterns, collateral, application, all those types of things. And my designer brain likes to just jump in deep with those. And I have a part of my process that allows for that kind of sporadic creativity. But a lot of my process is very structured to prevent me from getting too far down in that rabbit hole without first considering the foundations and really paying careful attention to typesetting specifically. So we're going to walk through what I'm calling the 5 layers of design. And this is going to help us just see my process. I have slides here because I'm visual, probably like you. And we're going to walk through kind of my process so you can implement this with your own design projects. So first up, I want to show you layer 5. This is the final layer because I want to show you what we're working toward. And then we'll work backwards and go starting with the first layer and building on that to get to this final design here. So this is the final layout design. And like I said, my inclination as a designer is to just dig in deep. If I was to lay out this is for a sample, like a concept project I created. This is not any kind of actual collateral. I don't even know what this is. Maybe it could be packaging. Maybe it's a signage. I don't know. But it really helps me to work in application. And so this is the final product. And my inclination as a designer is to just dig in and start here. Start with color, start with what type of imagery am I going to include? What fonts am I going to use? What's the layout? What's the grid I'm using? All those kinds of things from the get-go. And this process is going to protect me from doing that. So let's go ahead and go back to layer 1 and see how we build upon the design process to get to this final point. So this is the very first layer. It's what I'm calling the strategy layer. And likely you already include some type of strategy in your design process, whether you have formally called it strategy or it's something that is just part of innately in your process. This is definitely the foundation of any kind of design project. I will always remember, and this is it's over 10 years ago now, when I was in school, in a design class. I remember my professor gave us an assignment to design a publication design. And I came up with this really, what I thought was a beautiful layout. And it was a really fun promotion, actually promoting the art program at the school. And it was like maybe 20 pages or so. And my professor asked me like, this looks so good. What's the concept behind it? And I remember saying like, I don't know. I just want to create something pretty. I just want to create pretty things. And I had no idea like how much of a pivot I was about to experience as a designer in my craft when he said this next thing, which is that our role as designers is not to create pretty things. It's always stronger when there's a concept behind it. And I disagreed with him at that moment, just a prideful young designer. And now I look back at that and I still think about that over 10 years ago. That having a concept behind your design is truly the most impactful way to create something unique for the brand. Again, whether this is web layout, a simple, like maybe a web banner, anything kind of using type or something that's laying out with the design, it's really important to have some sort of strategy behind it. And so right now I have just a PDF. This is just pulled from Google Docs because I'm not going to lie to you and pretend like I have some really fancy strategy document that I have for my clients or for my own projects. This is just a creative brief, like a brand messaging guide that I created for this sample project here. And It's just a Google Doc, and it really just walks through the whole strategy of what this brand is about. It really helps me to know a starting place. Otherwise, when you're creating something with design, the options are infinite, right? Like, how do you filter down what typefaces to use? How do you filter down what colors to use or what imagery to use if you don't have some sort of like funnel to go through? And so this is the funnel process. This is layer one, the strategy. Layer two is typography. Often overlooked, kind of like on the back burner for a lot of us designers, is we kind of include it along with these other layers. And really, I think it's the foundation. Layer two, typography. So this is the logo type and a couple submarks. I think it's really important at this phase. This is a tip we're going to talk about later, is just designing in black and white. You notice this is not anything fancy here. I'm really focusing on the letter forms and paying careful attention to the type here. So this is the foundation. Layer three is layout. And you see here, I've got placeholder boxes. Like I have a circle there, some rectangles. I have a simple, like right here, it's a little Q. I'm just repeating some of these elements. I've already got the typography set from my the last layer. And now we're getting into layout. And so I'm just including these placeholder boxes. And I always do this in my designs. Again, web, publication design, whatever it is, to help me focus on typesetting, help me focus on layout, grid, structure, hierarchy, contrast. Those things are very important. And so it really helps me to pull back and not focus on all the fun stuff as designers, the illustrations, the patterns, the color, things like that. Layer four, now we're getting to the end of it. We're almost at the very finish line here. This is the color. We're going to implement color into the process. So you can see I'll just toggle back and forth. All I did was start playing with color palettes here. I included some warms and cools and some neutrals. And the layout hasn't changed at all. It's just shifting those colors, playing with different colors. So up until this point, again, whether I'm designing, like for instance, if this was going to be a packaging product, this is where I would start. I would not have color in it. I would do the layout first here. Whoops, got a sneak peek. I would do this layout first of the packaging. Then I would start considering color. And then after that is the final layer, which is imagery. Implementing those really unique touches to the brand, like the patterns. I replaced that Q right here with a floral pulled from up here, really small in this pattern here. I adjusted some of the layout to adjust for this really beautiful floral graphic that I have up here. But those are the finishing touches on the design. So you can see how my system builds on each other. I'll just go back through real quick. We've got layer one, strategy. Layer two, typography. Layer three, layout. Layer four, color. And finally, layer five is imagery. And you can see how the design kind of transitions layer by layer into the final product. So I want to leave you with about 3 tips. The first one is to design in black and white first. I know a lot of designers really dread this, but I found it very helpful in my process. And just at least try it and see how it goes. And it helps me as a designer to not get distracted, to focus on things like functionality first before form. Focus on hierarchy, structure, type, everything like that before I get into kind of the color and more of those distracting elements. You can't save a design by using an interesting color palette. I really believe that. The design needs to be strong and then really evolve into having that unique color palette. So design in black and white is the first one. Second up is to use these placeholder boxes like I have here and here. Just put in some placeholder boxes like these circles and rectangles, even for little graphic elements like this, knowing you're going to change this later. Maybe this does end up being just a solid color block system. I don't know what the final design needs to be, but for now, as you're designing the layout, use those placeholder boxes to your advantage. And the last tip is to edit later. Simply just have everything you want to design, have a huge messy artboard, several versions of pages, just replicating and changing one subtle thing. Just get messy as you are designing and know that you can edit later. Another tip I have from my creative director, actually several years ago, she would say, what can you remove from the design? And that's something that I'll always remember as well, along with my professor saying, have a concept. Second of all is, what can I remove from this design? So edit later. Don't feel like in the midst of the process, you need to be editing. That's something you can ask yourself later to pull back on anything that's distracting from specifically typesetting. And that's it for today's video. I'm looking forward to this next video where we are going to be dissecting type. I'm going to be revealing a fun trick I found to uncovering and sleuthing, being a detective, and finding out what fonts are used for other brands that you really look up to and admire. And then as well as dissecting some other designs so you can see why the type works, what fonts are in use, and you can implement that into your next project.